Hi there, my name's Nicola. I'm one of the founding directors of an organisation called Flourish Together. We support lots of different kinds of social and ethical ventures, charities and social enterprises, and we're pleased to be working in partnership with Sector 3, again, building on our Inspire to Enterprise series we supported them with, and really pleased to be part of the Proper Good series and helping create some webinars to bring bite-sized learning or accessible and easy learning to you if you're creating a social venture, community business, any form of social enterprise. We hope that some of these webinars will help you get on your way to either starting well or growing and scaling what you're doing. So the first one we've got for you is all about business planning, an introduction to various tools to aid with business planning, including the business model canvas tool itself. So we're going to work our way up to that. But first things first, I just wanted to throw down the gauntlet really and just say business plan, business plan. This is a phrase I come out with a lot. Before we get into the business model canvas itself, it's just to take a step back really and think about why are we doing this. If you've got an idea that you're creating to develop a social venture, writing a big hefty business plan is going to be quite a task. There's a lot you might not be able to complete within it, and it'd be off-putting. That said, if you're evolving and you've been running for a little while now and writing a business plan is the right thing to do, then getting some support to look at that can be really helpful. This short webinar is aimed at people on the spectrum of their journey, whether they're starting out developing ideas, whether they're getting everything together and they've been running for a year or so, or whether they're kind of progressing and moving forward. These tools are useful for you at various points along your journey and things that you can keep coming back to. So what I will say is there's a time and a place for a thorough business plan. And on the right-hand side of this screen here, you'll see a table of contents. I don't know if you can see that small text, but this is the contents page of a business plan that I wrote for the Old Abbey Tap House a little while ago to secure some loan funding, interestingly. I know the Proper Good project has got a whole set of investment options. And so understanding what you'll need to put together for different stages of where you're at will be really helpful. And, you know, when it came to securing loan funding, writing a thorough business plan with various elements, including, you know, the background, the market intelligence, the financial planning side of things, impact reports and everything else to back up why you're doing what you're doing, who the team are and so forth, is going to be crucial when you're going to secure investment or you're going for larger scale funds or you've been evolving and you've got a lot of information around what you do. But as I've said, it can be quite overwhelming. It can take a lot of time to put these things together. Realistically, they're a good, 15 to 20 to 30 pages long, depending on how much information you want to put in there, what you're using them for. People can get quite lost and bogged down in writing these things and never bring them off the page. Or there can be a 2D exercise when really all you need to get going is just get your ideas down, do a little bit of analysis on what some of the options are for you and get cracking. And I'm sure I speak for the team at Sector 3 and other funders, you know, the more simple you can create your information that you're sharing with investors, funders and various audiences that might need this information, the better. They don't really want to be reading 20 to 30 pages if they don't have to. They'd much rather see some succinct, short, straightforward reports and strategies and elements that might build up to a business plan, for example. So that's what we're going to walk through on this. And, you know, if you are at the stage where you're looking at more thorough business plans, you know, they do take time and money and expertise to do well. I would suggest, depending on the scale and the size of, you know, business plan you're looking to write, feasibility study, business plan, plans to draw, you know, to become investment ready. You know, they take some time to put together. And as I've said, I think, you know, and I would suggest, having worked with social and ethical ventures for over 22 years now, the easier way of getting this stuff started, it makes it more relevant for you, it makes it manageable, it makes sense actually as you're going along, is putting together some simple overview documents, summaries, key reports, strategy documents. As I said here, that they're perhaps less overwhelming, they're more usable and user-friendly, and they're perhaps more up to date and they're easy to update. If you write a big long business plan, it could be out of date within weeks, months, or within a year, because things shift and change so much with what you're doing. Whereas if you write simple sections, strategies, and chunks of what a business plan might evolve to become, you can go in and update that report, that strategy, that plan much more simply than trying to start from scratch with a business plan. So what we're going to look through here are a series of tools, things including something called a 2-sentence business plan, which I think is a useful tool that helps you build up to the model canvas. If this is new to you, right back to things like a SWOT analysis, PESTLE reports. And the beauty of looking at business planning in this way is it's not a wasted exercise. The sections or the tools or the very simple tasks, thinking tasks, that you can map things down and analyse what you're doing, or help get out of your head or your board of directors' heads or your community's heads what it is you're doing, will help you piece all of this stuff together, communicate what you're doing, assess the risks, evidence the need for what you're doing, and put together plans and strategies to help convince people that they want to back you, support you, get involved with what you're doing. And then further down the line, some of these tools, or even building up to certain sections and reports, can then piece together a business plan. And let's have a look at some of these tools for starters, to aid you on your journey towards that business planning. So first things first, one of the most basic and simple ways you can start to show yourself, your team, your board, wider partners and investors you've thought about what you're doing is by doing a SWOT analysis. And that's looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What can happen when you've got this idea in your head, or you've seen this problem that you want to address in your community, and you think your idea is the best one to solve it. People get a bit blinking, a bit headlong in what they're doing. And also, as these ideas snowball, it can get a little bit overwhelming trying to keep up with that snowball that's running down the hill, and understand what are the strengths of what is our USP compared to other areas or other projects. What are the weaknesses in what's going on here? What's the bigger picture in terms of opportunities and threats, so you can manage your decision making a little better and you can share your thoughts with others. This tool's great for that. And you can do it with a simple idea. If you're one of those ideas people where it's bing, 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 and you're having all sorts of ideas, this tool can be good to sort of categorize and think, what's the best one to work on, and what's the one to put back on the shelf, or what's the one to not bother with because it's actually not going to be the best idea for you to take forward. It can be used for when you're creating projects or creating new programs or products and services. You can do a quick SWOT analysis on those programs, products, or services, or you can do a whole sort of business or program thinking piece using this tool. So although it looks quite simple, it can be used for a number of methods and reasons depending on where you're at on your journey, both ideas generation, startups, and scale-ups alike, depending on what you're doing. So it's very simple. You get yourself a piece of A4, or however you want to write this stuff down. You can create yourself a table or a chart or a series of boxes, in a Word document or something similar, and you can simply just start to map down what your strengths are. And that might be, the strengths of the idea, the strengths of your team, the strengths of, the need for this in the marketplace right now. You can also, alongside that, be honest with yourself and think, what don't we know? What are the weaknesses here? What in terms of what do we need to upskill in? What do we need to get better at? What could be improved in terms of the way we're going about doing this, or trying to do this, or scaling this up right now? And then taking it outside of your immediate sort of knowledge and skill set, perhaps thinking about the future, the bigger picture, and perhaps the unforeseen, and thinking about, you know, what are the future opportunities for this idea? You know, what do the community think about what you're doing? Who's got budget and interest and would potentially back what it is you're doing? Who are your contacts and networks, and what opportunities might they bring to help you get this off the ground? You know, and threats might be, it might be competitors, it might be, you know, the sort of, you know, climate crisis, or, you know, cost of living stuff, and it might be the way certain budget cuts are going on, it might be the way we don't know the political landscape sometimes, depending on, you know, what's going on in the country. There are all sorts of threats. You know, it might be that you're designing something particular, and actually digital technology or the way the digital age is working might mean that this thing that you're developing becomes obsolete in a period of time. There's all sorts of potential threats if you're prepared to be honest and have a think about it. And you can do this in your own mind and map this stuff down. What I'd recommend, wherever possible, is work with others. You know, it might be a mentor, it might be, you know, co-founders or other directors, trustees, it might be with your community, it might be with a focus group, if you're thinking about developing a new product, service, program, activity, or otherwise. So whilst you can start this on paper or start this on your own, the more you can get other brains and people to feed into this, the more you'll see things that you alone wouldn't have contemplated. So that's one type of plan. It's simple, it can be used across a range of purposes, and it's really an easy one to start. It's not overwhelming. You know, you just set off you go, and you get your points, bullet points down. You've not got to write a big essay, and this exercise is never wasted, because a SWOT table or a SWOT analysis of where you're at is often cut and paste into a business plan. It's often, you know, something people want to see, and this helps with your pitching ideas and asking people for support and investment. They'll be asking you, well, you know, why should we back this? You know, is there anything that you know you're going to need help with? What's the opportunity for this? What else haven't you considered? Who are your competitors? These sorts of questions are questions that outside agencies will ask you, and having mapped some of this stuff down and thought it through, you'll have your answers ready to go, and you'll have thought things through in a much bigger way, and give yourself confidence in what you are doing and what you need to ask for help with. Okay, so that's SWOT analysis. Moving along, because doing SWOT analysis tells you so much, and often there's quite a lot of unknowns when you start thinking about, am I developing this idea? Am I developing this program service? How are we developing our overall sort of business going forward? This opportunities and threats side and can only really be answered with a little bit more deeper thinking. So this next tool is called you might have PESTLE analysis, and you might have heard that too and thought, what on earth is that? It used to be called PEST, and PEST analysis, and then this extra bits get added on. So this PESTLE analysis, as you'll see from this table here, builds on the SWOT analysis, and it helps you think about the bigger picture. And as I put here, it gives you a bit of a deeper dive into the wider context, helps you understand some of the risks, things to do with also those opportunities, possible threats as well, but helps you understand the demand. And any funder, any loan investor, any commissioner of services is going to want to understand the bigger picture context of why your idea, your product, your service, your program, your series of activities is worth backing, is that the time is now, you know, why your service or activities and why now. And by having a bigger picture think on, you know, what's the political context, you know, for what you're doing, you know, is what you're saying you want to do meeting local government or local authority or national priority need? You know, what's the you know, wider social context, maybe the social history and the kind of context that's led to the need for what you're doing, and the kind of societal need and demand for what you're doing. What's the local need, particularly in looking at support through the proper good support and funds. Thinking about things on a local footprint is a key part of what they're looking at. in this context, supporting sector 3 in Stockport, but in those other areas of Wigan, Bolton, Oldham, you know, what's happening locally, and what is there a local need? Is there a local gap? What are the local priorities? What's your you know, local policy documents saying for what you're trying to do? Likewise, there'll be both a local and a national economic sort of picture going on for you right now. There'll be you know, local budgets and local sort of economic development needs, and local economic strategies. And I guess you know, you might just want to set up a very simple project, you know, and that's absolutely fine. And thinking about what the economic picture for this may or may not be quite as relevant, but as you start to evolve what you're doing, you know, making those contacts and relations to think about how what you're doing sits within a wider economic strategy, be that in your borough, be that across Greater Manchester Combined Authority, or be that nationally. Thinking about the economic picture, both in terms of your service users, community, beneficiaries, you know, what's the economic picture telling them? And does that lend itself to either them having a financial need and being able to pay for what you're doing, or the opposite, lacking financial means and needing your service to be in kind, subsidised, and you know, offered free at the point of access. And by understanding the local economic context of what you're doing, that will help you know, tell the story and tell the demand for why what you're doing is important. And I think there are businesses where, you know, the economic picture is crucial and key, you know, in over and above just running a business and thinking about, you know, will your business work, or will your social enterprise or project work in the local economic climate or the national economic climate. You've got to also think there are businesses out there that directly feed into this. So, for example, if you're looking at upskilling people to get them into jobs, or maybe you're working with ex-offenders or people who are furthest from the workplace to get them into work, you could be adding value to the local economy. And in essence, most social enterprises are adding both social and economic value to the local and national picture. And so thinking about these things either from the start, or at least as you evolve what you're doing, is key to really understanding where your venture sits within a bigger picture, and starts to give you some language and some information to present your ideas about that to others. I mentioned before about digital technology, and you know, sometimes the technological landscape can, you know, make or break what you're doing. You know, if you're developing particular things and you haven't thought about how to involve and include digital technology in what you're doing, it can be a real challenge. You know, a competitor might come in and do something radically different using technology, and mean that there's no longer a need for what you're doing. Likewise, it could be with the communities you're working with, there are, you know, technological barriers, and there's a real need for why you need to you know, deliver the services that you are with minimal technology, because there might be you know, people might not have access to whatever laptops, social media, or not have any interest in that, you know, depending on, you know, where they're coming from, or you know, what their level of skill, will and knowledge is on all of that. So different sides of a technological coin to think about when you're thinking about what the risks might be to your project, idea or venture. And last but not least in this set, environmental. So, you know, we're all living in a different age now, where the environment is becoming very more apparent as a bigger picture risk to us all. I think, you know, delivering workshops like this years ago, it was a kind of, well, you know, think about it, but I would say, you know, with some of those agendas out there around becoming, you know, having low carbon futures, you know, achieving net zero in terms of, you know, carbon emissions by certain times, thinking about, you know, floods and environmental issues, and you know, how the weather and the climate affect what we do. You can't really imagine how seriously we have to take this in the bigger picture context as well. You might just be wanting to run something simple, you know, and get things started, but funders and commissioners and your community will be interested to know, how are you being sort of environmentally responsible? What steps are you taking to ensure that you know, you are reducing your carbon footprint, for example? So bearing these things in mind, even on a, you know, a community project where, you know, all you might be able to do is, you know, think about how you might minimize waste, for example, or use different kinds of methods to run your activities so that you're having less an effect on the environment, are things that have become ever more important when people are making decisions about who they are and aren't going to back, invest, fund, or buy services from. So this PESTLE analysis, again, is just another tool where once you've done a bit of a SWOT analysis and thought about those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to what you're doing, and perhaps done that with a bigger group of people, then this PESTLE analysis to think through, you know, what are some of the risks, what's going on in your community, in your sphere of influence, you know, in the news or nationally, in terms of what you're aware of that may or may not affect how you might plan, deliver, and run or evolve what it is you're doing. And you can put down things in terms of risks and bullet point down things that you're aware of in these areas that you know can help or hinder what it is you're doing, and to what extent the level of risk is for you and what you're doing in that area right now. Something else that's important within the PESTLE analysis is if you think you've evidenced a need for something, or if you think you've highlighted something that's going to be difficulty that you want to overcome, or is a piece of evidence that's going to highlight, you know, why you should be doing what you're doing, then there are all sorts of policy reports out there, local policy reports with health and well-being, or with transport, or with environment, or with housing, or with education and skills. There's, you know, there's local councils, joint strategic needs boards, there's the GMCA, Greater Manchester Combined Authority. There are sort of national charities and policy think tanks that are constantly researching, you know, what are societal challenges, what are the needs we need to address, what are the recommendations for public sector, private sector, voluntary community sector to do whatever it is that needs to be done. These policy reports that sit out there, whether or not you've realised they exist yet or whether or not you're using them, can really add backing and endorsement for the work that you're doing. Even if you're starting out and you haven't really done much market research yet, or you've not really surveyed or talked to your community much about what you're doing, there'll be lots of evidence out there. Once you've thought it through in some of these terms, you know, is it local evidence and local policy that you're working to? Is it sort of a wider sort of national sort of economic picture? Is it what you're doing within technology? There'll be a whole raft of societal and social challenges that you might be addressing. Just having a think about, if you're not already using existing policy reports, research and evidence that's been done, will really help strengthen and help you guide you in your direction of travel of what you're going to develop based on recommendations where it's loud and clear there's a real need for this, this and this. Or it might help you refine down your ideas based on what, you know, the research is telling you, and it will give you a much stronger foundation on which to build your social business or organisation, as well as convince the powers that be that you're worth backing, commissioning, and buying from. So something to bear in mind there. Moving along, before we get into the business model canvas tool, you know, which is the, you know, we'll explain the beauty of that in a minute, but it helps you to create a simplistic way of getting everything about what you're trying to do down in one foul swoop. This 2-sentence business plan does the same thing, but it's a little bit more simplistic. So if you're at the early stages of what you're doing, this tool is really helpful. Or if you're developing a new product or service and you don't want to get into the realms of business planning just yet, you're just trying to work out what are the strengths and weaknesses of this concept or idea? How might we take this idea forward? this 2-sentence business plan, or even 2-sentence project or activity plan, is really useful. And if you go online, you can download this off the website at Idea to Inception. But really, you don't have to take too long at this. You can take 15 minutes, 20 minutes just getting it down, or then you can build into areas of this tool where actually you need to do a little bit more thinking, a little bit more research, or build some contacts, or do a little bit more practical planning. So if you haven't done already, you should be able to walk through this tool and make some notes, basically. So in terms of what's the problem, so perhaps if I give Flourish as an example, what is the problem? So Flourish Together is an organisation, although we're a pay-it-forward consultancy, we do all sorts of business development and social value measurement work for social and ethical businesses and charities. We actually reinvest our profits supporting women as a force for social change. So the problem for us when we've started looking into it is that not enough women get into leadership positions, not enough women are developing businesses. Statistically, less women than men have been doing that historically. And also, when it comes to getting backing and investment for women to take their ideas forward, believe it or not, only a penny in every pound of venture capital money, so investors' money, only a penny in every pound has been going to women-led ventures. So those are some of the problems that we've spotted. There's a lack of women in this, there's a lack of money being invested there, and there's a lack of I guess innovation really being led by women, because they're out of the picture, they're out of the room when it comes to designing businesses and services and whatever else in order to address wider community needs. So for us, that was the problem. Who has this problem? Well, yes, you could just say women, but actually, society has this problem. And when you think about the target market, although you can think big and think, oh well, everybody's got this problem. Actually, it makes really good sense to really pinpoint down who's the target market and who the beneficiaries of most need are in your situation. So from Flourish's point of view, for us, it's women who perhaps face setbacks. Not all women have problems in setting up in business or being a leader or taking their ideas forward. Some have forged away from a young age and gone on and done that. But for us, we found that women who lack financial means, women from different diverse cultural backgrounds, women who've faced, as I say, all sorts of setbacks, be they to do with health, be they to do with relationship breakdown, be they to do with being treated badly at work, you name it. We've picked a specific target group of women, really leaders with lived experience, who we think can change society for the better. And that's the people that we're targeting with what we seek to support. And we know that local authorities and wider customers that we work with, be they housing associations, universities, and other sectoral organisations in health, in education and training, in the corporate world, align with this problem in different ways. And in terms of how we solve the problem, with various products and services that we've developed over the years, some of them are programs, so tailored training and support programs. Some of them are light touch ad hoc events that people come to. Some of the organisations, what we've realised we needed to do over time was build specialist consultancy support to help women-led organisations or broader, public sector and private organisations better engage with certain communities and certain types of ventures and so on. So, how are you going to solve the problem is about mapping down what are your products and services, what are they going to be, what are you going to create to address the problem, and then thinking through from there on in, why should the people who has this problem buy from you? In reality, in the social economy, often the person who has this problem can't buy from you, and so you have to think carefully about who your customers, beneficiaries and stakeholders are. You know, the customer is buying the product or service either directly, you know, because you're trading with them, or indirectly, you might be having some funding to subsidise the cost, or a grant agreement with a local authority to cover the cost of delivering something. Or you know, you might be working with commissioners to do this so that local authorities or you know, health and social care services or some other commissioner might be buying in your support and services and expertise to deliver something that's delivering a series of outcomes for them. And so in order to convince, whether it's the direct public, whether it's funders or whether it's commissioners, that they should be buying from you, you've really got to work through your USP, as they say, your unique sort of proposition, unique, and think about what your competitive advantage is. And doing an exercise like that, SWOT analysis, should start to give you some answers to this, as should the PESTLE report, because you can demonstrate you're aware of the bigger picture and talk about how you're addressing particular kinds of needs in new ways. And you obviously, in running any venture, whether you're just starting out or whether you're scaling, you know, having access to resources to make this thing happen is a priority. You know, you can't have yourself going bankrupt. Too many people spend a lot of their own money on their own sort of idea development, which, you know, when it's your own venture, fair enough, but often in the social economy or with social enterprises, because what you're developing is for social good, if you're setting up your legal structure in a particular way, then you will have access to wider resources because it's a not-for-private profit venture or a charity or whatever else. So even from a standing start, you can map out, you know, what the key resources are that you're going to have access to get either an idea off the ground, a new service developed, or, you know, evolving your business as it grows, your social business as it grows. And clearly that's about more than money, actually. You know, money is one thing, and as you see in some sections below, you know, working out what it's going to cost and how you're going to make money are important. But when it comes to making resources come together to deliver what you're trying to do, it's actually about the kind of skills and talent that you've got access to, the kind of networks and contacts you've got, the kinds of well, it's saying intellectual property here, but also in the social economy, there might be other sort of pro bono and in-kind support that for a period of time while you test something, or even for the long term, you might need access to. And have you got the relationships to access free meeting space or free storage space, or whatever it might be, sponsored costs in addition to the other money and resources that you will need. Thinking back to the people that you're trying to support, money aside, even if you've got all your money, you found your funding and you're doing whatever it is you're up to, making sure that you engage with the people that you're seeking to reach is critical. It's critical as you're trying to help the wider community. It's critical because you need to know what you're delivering is what they want and need, and is making a difference for them. And it's critical because if you're being funded or commissioned to do something and you don't deliver, you know, they'll be having words with you, or they won't fund you, or you know, commission you again. So making sure that you know how you're going to reach people is key, and that sometimes looks like marketing and sales and advertising, possibly distribution if you've got goods that you're and services that you're pushing out there. But it's also about, you know, perhaps specialist ways in which you're reaching your community. Often social ventures, they might be targeting a slightly smaller group of people than the great British public. And, you know, how are you going to ensure that you've got their trust, that you're speaking in a language that makes sense to them in terms of what services you're offering them, and you know, ensuring that they're buying into what you're doing, whether that's turning up, coming along, or physically purchasing something to what's going on. This next strip of questions, you know, how much is it going to cost? How are you going to make money? When should it be done? This starts to form a bit of a financial and project plan, doesn't it? You know, working out what your budget's going to need to look like, so you've not got any unforeseen costs, and so that you know what you're asking for in perhaps a funding bid, or you're costing up and pricing your products and services accordingly and getting full cost recovery for what you're doing. You can't really put an accurate price on something if you haven't fully costed out what it's going to be to do it or to deliver it. And that's, it might be capital costs, you know, equipment, or potentially buildings, or, you know, hire of space. It might be staffing or volunteer costs, travel costs, transport, marketing and promotional costs, training and upskilling people costs. There's all sorts of different kinds of costs, and we've got other sessions previously in looking at that, and there'll be others coming up, no doubt, through the proper good groups. But how much it's going to cost in return, how much you're going to make money, you know, thinking about, you know, where is this money coming from, you know, what are your products and services, what's the business model that ensures that the finance is coming back. And we've got a session coming up next on income generation strategies, and this will really sort of help people think through, you know, how they're going to generate income for what they're doing. And so, yeah, both revenue and income streams, thinking about margins, or how you can create some sort of surplus or profits to reinvest in your community, looking at how you charge. So that you might have a sliding scale of pricing, so that some customers will pay one price because they've got the budget, the means, and so forth, with the sliding scale that kind of Robin Hood effect is not unusual, where those who can pay do pay or are charged accordingly, and that then subsidises and offsets the cost to others. There are all sorts of others options of the kind of buy one give one sorts of methods. But ultimately, how are you going to make money? How you think that you're going to create some sort of sustainability as a minimum, or surplus to reinvest in your community is key, and ensuring that you're good value for the customer, be that the direct public, the commissioner, the funder, or anyone else. And timelines clearly about your project planning and setting milestones for when things should be done, so that you can review and reflect and think, did we achieve what we thought we were going to achieve in the time that we said we might? And if not, why not? And what happened? And, you know, how you shift and adapt and change things and accurately predict what you're trying to do in future. Just further down on this last set here, you know, measures of success. Here it talks about measures of success. You know, in real terms, in the social economy, you know, impact measurement is a big thing. Not just key performance indicators or having SMART objectives, that sort of specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. And setting those, you know, helps you plan for what you're doing, but actually see, did we achieve it? Was it a success? In addition to physically knowing you did what you said you were going to do, over and above that, within social enterprises, we're looking at, did we achieve the impact we set out to achieve? Has the community improved for the better? Are people's lives improving as a result of what it is we're doing? And so success metrics for a social enterprise are about more than did we do this? Did we do that? Did our planning in terms of how we're going to operate work? It's about more than that. You know, have people's health and well-being improved as a result? You know, are more people in work now? Are there more young people feeling that they've got aspirations? Whatever it is that you're looking to do, those are built into your measures of success. And there is a webinar coming up on impact and value measurement in this series, so look out for that. And then ultimately, you know, thinking through some of this stuff, you know, and I spent 10 or 15 minutes having to think about this, and doodling away is, you know, doodle away and get your bullet points down in terms of what you think you're wanting to do. Ultimately, it's about what next for you and thinking through your next steps. What's your to-do list as a result of this? And so, you know, if you take, you know, a couple of minutes here to sort of reflect on these points, whether you've got some paper to hand, whether you've got this in your head, you're mapping it out in some other way, you know, wherever you've got to in your thinking over the, you know, course of this webinar, in terms of the problem, who's got this problem, some ideas or key products and services that you're developing or have in order to address that. Thinking about what, why people should buy from you. What is it you're doing differently? What's unique about what you're doing? Thinking about, what key resources do you either need or do you already have, and you can list those out and highlight, what you've already got, what you still need to source or find or write into bids or put into your sort of costing plans. Thinking about how you're going to reach your customers, but in our world, customers and beneficiaries, they might be the same, but they might be different. Highly likely they're different, particularly when you're starting out. Thinking about those costs involved, how you're going to be making money in different ways, and thinking about, what's going on for you and how do you know you'll have been successful through this project that you're doing, through this idea that you're developing, or through a wider sort of business planning piece. What are the measures of success for your business, your project, your activity, in terms of delivering it, in terms of the impact that it's going to create? Thinking through in the next month or in the next couple of months, when you reflect on this 2-sentence business plan, what's next for you? Have you got it sewn up? Do you know exactly what you're doing? Are you now going to apply for proper good? Do a thorough business planning exercise for the loan fund, or put together a pitch for some of their smaller scale grants and some of the super funding activities that are going on. Get down to one of their chips and change events and that kind of thing in Stockport. Or actually, if you looked at this and thought, I just don't know, and so you need to do a little bit more research into what things are going to cost, or a little bit more research into what's the problem. You want to run a creative craft session because you're a creative arts practitioner, but what's the problem you're solving, and how are you telling people what that is? Is it health and well-being? Are you doing creative arts for well-being? Is it there's loads of materials out there that are going into landfill, and you're trying to recycle old stuff into art to build a sort of cohesive community? Going away and working out the why might be your next step. Or it might be thinking, do you know what, we've got all this really good stuff, but nobody knows about it. And your next step might be thinking about how you reach the customer and thinking about how you're going to market what you're doing and advertise what you're doing. And do you need to upskill in social media? Do you need to outsource something in this tool that actually isn't your area? And that's normal. It might be that you need to find an accountant. It might be that you need to find someone who's great at social media. But think about what are your next 3 next steps over the next month to help you progress this plan and move it forward. So hopefully that's been useful. Just to finish off, for those of you that are ready for that, it might be that actually that's all you need to hear to get cracking, and off you go. And this is what I'm going to say next might be a step too far, but we wanted to introduce the business model canvas because it's something that a lot of people, whether they realise it or not, perhaps working towards when they're setting up a project or idea. And certainly funders, investors, commissioners, and you, to get your head clear on what you're doing, will find the business model canvas tool useful if you haven't used it already. And the beauty of these tools is you won't have to spend 15, 20 minutes, an hour or so on them at a time to think them through before right, this is my next step, this is what I'm doing next, or to be able to start to communicate with others to kind of analyse, critique, and make suggestions on what's happening and how things are moving forward. So moving on from the 2-sentence business plan, we're just going to share with you what is this business model canvas. And if you've already done a lot of this stuff and you're just listening to this as a recap, apologies if we're teaching you to suck eggs, but stick with it and use this as a refresher and a refreshing tool. So as I've mentioned, this business model canvas, it builds on what I've just shown you as a slightly more simplistic 2-sentence business plan. And just like that, it's quite easy to understand. and it's very focused. So instead of writing, you know, full-on 20-page business plan, which who wants to read, let alone write a 20-page business plan, it gets everything succinct down on one page and gives you some clarity really on what's going on, and hopefully information that you can share with others. That's the plan. It's very customer focused or community focused, and it's encouraging you to think about what value you're bringing to people. You know, what value in terms of economic value, and you know, this is worth them spending their money or their time with this, but also what value you're bringing to them in terms of social impact, social change, and social improvement. It also helps show these connections, that how setting up a business and then operating and delivering a business, it's all a series of moving parts. It's a jigsaw that you've got expertise in some areas and not others, and all the while you're trying to make this thing happen. It helps show the connections between one element and another of what you're trying to do, and shows you how things relate to one another. Perhaps in a traditional business plan, you've got these sections and chunks, and you've got to flip from page to page to try and make sense of how do we piece this together. And certainly for funders and investors, when they're trying to make sense of what you're doing, having this all clear and down in one space can be really helpful for them, save them time in thinking things through. And as we've said, it should be a good way to kind of capture how you're creating and delivering, and capturing for yourself, measuring the success of that value and that delivery in those projects and services and ventures that you're developing. So in terms of, this business model canvas, ultimately it's helping you think through and then demonstrate what your business model is. What's the method by which you're going to create a sustainable activity, entity, organization, and it's showing a mechanism through which you'll be able to generate profits whilst deliver value, for your customers, beneficiaries, stakeholders, and others. As we've said throughout this webinar, people can get a bit bogged down, or they can certainly get into writing a waffly business plan, without ever thinking how it's fully going to be achieved and delivered, and how all the different parts of what you're trying to do will function and hang together. In theory, the business model canvas should help with that, and it'll help you work out where your strengths are, where you feel most comfortable, and where actually there's more risk or more unknowns that you perhaps need some help with, need to ask for support with, or as you come to evolve a team over time, if whether it's a volunteer group or a staff team, or strengthen your board, you'll be able to spot areas where you need to invite people on, or recruit people for different things, or seek associates or advisors in certain ways. So here's one example. There are various business model canvases and social business model canvases. They're all structured or layered in a slightly different way, but they all help you achieve the same end goal, basically, which is working out what it is you're doing and clearly and cleverly putting that together. What this social business canvas doesn't do is ask you about your mission, which I would say is key. And there are some social business canvases out there that have sort of mission up at the top before they then start getting into everything else. And I would present a bit of a challenge to you there. And do you know what your overarching mission is? There's an exercise you can do called a theory of change, and we'll talk about that in the measuring your impact and communicating impact and value session shortly. But having a think about what's your overarching mission, kind of putting it out on the tin exactly what it is you do, is key. And it can be quite hard to do, because sometimes you've started doing something because it's born out of a passion or an interest of yours, or it's born out of an experience of yours, or it's born out of spotting a community problem. And trying to put the phrases around why you're doing what you're doing can get a bit tricky. Looking at some ways of doing this, one of the challenges I could put to you to think about now or beyond this website, this webinar, is thinking, if you could succinctly say in 8 words, have an 8-word mission statement, what would that be? The reason I'm asking you that is because Stanford, American University, they've done a review thinking about how different social innovation organisations work. It was a review that was aimed at non-profits, and one of the recommendations was having an 8-word mission statement to help people pin down what it is they do, clearly and succinctly let the world know that, and then everything else that they build sort of forms under that. So just to give you some examples, and some of them are shorter than 8 words, when this was put to a group of organisations and NGOs, non-government organisations, as to what they're doing, what's their mission. One example is, save kids' lives in Uganda. Another is rehabilitate coral reefs in the Western Pacific. Another one is unlock the potential of ex-offenders, giving them a second chance. And I think, when I thought, well, I can't give you a task without having done it myself. Unfortunately, when I look back at what Flourish says is our mission, we're 9 words, we're not 8, so maybe I have to do some work there. But, we invest in women change makers as a force for social change. Or invest in women as a force for social change. And so, that's what our mission is. And there's, other things around all of that, the why, but that's putting it out there on the tin. What is it you do? How, if somebody asks you, what is it you do? What is this organisation all about? Rather than getting tongue-tied in a big old story, just giving them a clear message is really helpful. And you might have heard that elevator pitch. If you get into a lift with somebody, you've got 30 seconds to tell them what it is you do, to get them to be interested, to buy something, to come to something, to put some money in a crowdfund campaign, whatever the call to action is. Getting it very clearly down what you do is really helpful. So I sow that seed out there as, have you got down a clear 8-word sentence or statement as to what your mission is? The vision can be the bigger picture as to kind of, why, but getting that mission down clearly is really helpful. And then everything that falls into the social business canvas falls kind of under that mission. Okay, so once you've got your 8 words down in terms of setting out what you do, you'll be able to then think about everything else. So looking at this, it's a picture of 2 halves, really. I sort of imagine this as 2 sort of upside down L shapes. You've got your key resources, key activities, type of intervention. So that's what the activities specifically are, partners and stakeholders and so on. So in the top segments, that's all about how you're going to implement what you do. How are you going to run and deliver and do what you do is key resources, key activities, and who are the partners and stakeholders involved. And then on the flip side of that, you've got, everything that's to do with how you're going to, market what you're doing, gather that intelligence, and demonstrate and deliver change is the flip side of that. And then this section across the bottom, from cost, surplus, and revenue, is all about the finances. So you've got these sort of 2 halves of the same canvas, and then this strip across the bottom that's all about the money. So I'm just going to walk through this a little bit, and feel free, you can look online. If you just Google social business model canvas, this and other examples will come up. Sorry. And you'll be able to print the sheet out or cut and paste this into a Word document or PowerPoint or whatever's best for you to start to create text boxes, or print this out to write yourselves. Or no doubt, if you get in touch with Sector 3 or you contact us directly, and our details are coming up at the end, we can email you templates of this sort of stuff. So I'd say it doesn't really matter where you start with this. You tend to start with what you know. You know what you know, and you can fill the boxes in based on what you're already doing. And then there'll be clear chunks that are kind of empty, or you've got less of a sense of an understanding of, and that might be where the work is needed or your next steps are needed. But in terms of the mission, this is where we start with your social value proposition. What are you trying to change? what are you seeking to change for the better? You know, so we'd like to see a world where more women lead social change and increase their economic independence as a result. So we invest in women change makers as a force for social change. You know, those sorts of phrases are what we will have in our social value proposition in terms of measuring that success. You know, how many women and or other social enterprises, we work with guys as well, and we work with all sorts of different agencies in order to achieve our goals. You know, how do we know that we're going to create some social impact based on what we're trying to achieve? And that might look like numbers of people that we've worked with. It might look like the numbers of events or training sessions that we've run, the number of hours of consultancy in kind or other or paid for that we've delivered. And you know, there are lots of other impact measures around that in terms of, so what? You work with these people, you saw these people at your events, these people turned up to your activities, then what? What happened as a result? And when we run the impact measurement session in webinar 3, that will really fill a gap there potentially. If you've not been thinking about how are you measuring your impact and what's the social value you're creating, then that will fill a gap. But ultimately, the value proposition is what your funders, your commissioners, and people that are going to back this work want to see. Whether or not you can answer the questions in there right now is another matter. And whether you can understand what your beneficiaries and stakeholders want alongside what your direct customers want, you know, will be down to how much market research you've done, whether or not you understand where they're already buying their services from and who your competitors are. So those are the kinds of pieces of work that you've got to do in order to understand, you know, what your social value proposition is, what your impact measures are, and you know, the customer value proposition, as in what they want to get out of this initiative. And you know, when you start thinking about who your beneficiaries are, you know, it might be young people, it might be single parents, it might be ex-offenders, it might be people with mild to moderate mental health issues. You know, thinking about who are your beneficiaries and who are your customers. Are they the same people or are they different? And it might be that your customers are, you know, a corporate that sponsors this work, and they want to see some benefit and some CSR, some corporate social responsibility return as a result. It might be that your customer, in a way, might be the funders who are investing and backing in your work. They've been funded and they've got money, whether it's the lottery or groundwork or the Proper Good Fund or others. They've been tasked with spending public money in order to achieve change in different ways. And so they're a kind of customer, but it's a different relationship and the money works differently. Or customers might be commissioners of specialist services. But who do you imagine your customers are going to be? Or do you know they are because they're already spending with you? And who are the beneficiaries? And you know, where they align, great, and where they don't, that's fine too, and that's perfectly normal in the way we run what we're doing. You might not know who your customers are if you're just starting out. You know, this might take some time to figure out, and that's fine. And you know, at this stage, where you've got blank sections and you're not sure, that's a good exercise, because you can go back to the team at Sector 3 or your Proper Good area, or you can come to us at Flourish or other organisations that are around that help people think of this stuff through and access some support, or you'll know where to go on a training webinars and courses to fill your knowledge and skills gaps and get contacts and networks in those areas. On the opposite side, so it might be when you looked at this, maybe you can instantly say, oh, well, I know what my activities are. I know I'm running a weekly drop-in, or I know I'm running several workshops, or I know I'm baking cakes or serving food or catering for a certain community. People will often start in that key activity side because it's where they feel safe. They know what they want to run or what they are running. It's the everything else that you might have to take a step back and think around that. So, what are the series of activities that you're, you think you're going to be doing? So, your key activities might be, running services that help people with mental health issues, or reducing waste that's going into landfill, and delivering catering as a result. It might be you're supporting young people to boost their aspirations, and you're delivering different kinds of training and support to help them to get ahead in life. So thinking about what your overarching activities are is one thing, and then you might want to break that down into particular formats. So just because you're running programs of support for a particular community, there's more than one way to deliver that. And it might be that you're doing it one way right now because that's all you know, or that's what you've been tasked with, or that's what there's budget for, or that's what people are asking for right now. But it might be that in terms of types of intervention now or in the future, it might be that actually, you're delivering a workshop right now, but that could be turned into online workshops or online tools and resources. It might be that you're going on visits and taking people out and about, but it might be that you create a series of little films or podcasts to help capture the learning of what you're doing and to then help promote what you're doing to other communities or other people further down the line. It might be that you're baking cakes, or you've got particular skills and talents for creating food from your own cultural background, and you're doing, you're creating certain ad hoc products at the minute, but longer term you might turn that into a catering service or catering services for specific organizations, or you might be running cooking workshops, and then further down the line that might be turned into a training program or a way to help others take their cooking skills into setting up their own cooking business or whatever, creating products, and so on. So pinning down those interventions that you're doing or that are opportunities for the future help you think about what's happening now and what you might work towards, because whenever you're applying for funds or whenever you're trying to demonstrate to the wider world or commissioners, here's what we're doing and here's how we're trying to evolve, you've got some ideas and some thoughts in the pipeline as to what might be possible for the future. We talked before on that 2-sentence business plan, how are you reaching your beneficiaries and customers? And you'll find if you've done the 2-sentence business plan, a lot of those questions that are asked on that tool, just flip back, a lot of the questions that were asked here are very similar to the questions that are being asked on the business model canvas. So I'll just give you that sort of comparison, that you can start with one and then expand it, or the two sort of go hand in hand. So there's thinking about how you're reaching your beneficiaries and ways that you're going to market yourself to them. How do they want to engage with you? Physically, remotely? How are they going to come across the information? Is it newsletters? Is it things through the door? Are they very still sort of paper-based leaflets and posters, or is it much more about being on different kinds of social media that are going to be appropriate to those groups? And in terms of channels, some of that's about marketing what you're doing and getting out to people. Some of that's about reporting back and evidence-basing and showcasing what you're doing. So there might be different channels for different people for those different segments. There's a channel to communicate and reach your beneficiaries, and there's a channel to communicate and reach your customers. People don't always think of that on the outset, and it's a bit like, sounds like a lot of stuff, but it all happens in its own good time. And so long as you're aware that actually your beneficiaries might need talking to, communicating with, or reaching in a different way to your customers, or vice versa, then you can start to plan that in by the way you spend your time, the way you plan your marketing, the way you structure your website, the way you use social media, will all help reach people in different ways and communicate what people want to know, what they need to hear, what evidence and information they want from you, to get involved, to endorse what you're doing, and to grow your reputation and the work that you do. Again, people will perhaps easily bullet point down perhaps what some of their activities are and their interventions are, but behind all of that, there are resources and there are people that help you get this stuff done. So just like on the 2-sentence business plan, what are the resources you're going to need to run your activities? And again, it's about people, it's about money, it's about, other networks and access to stuff. Mapping down your key resources is a key part of this, as is understanding who are the people that need to be involved, and some of that's about referral partners, some of that's about people that might champion and promote what you do. Some of it might be people who help you deliver stuff. You don't have to be all things to all people. And as you might start off running your own, whatever, cooking sessions, drop in for people doing such and such, arts for well-being stuff, some of the examples we've talked about along the way. Actually, as you evolve, you might need some volunteers to come and help, or you might need some associate, freelancers or people to bring in as part of your staff team to help deliver what you're doing. There's all sorts of partners and stakeholders that you will need as you evolve, and mapping down who you've got helping you now and who you might need in future, even if you can't name them just yet, will help you spot opportunities, spot people, spot networks that you perhaps need to align yourself with to grow a pool of people, partners and others who will help you make your project, your venture, your organisation a success. And then this whole chunk across the bottom, is about money and costs and income. So in thinking about your activities and the types of interventions you're going to run, what are your biggest areas of expenditure? What are you spending money on now? Or what's your biggest area that you're getting in kind right now that's probably a risk, but it might be a necessity and might be somewhere for the longer term you might need to find income or resources to cover. Or what do you've had to buy up front in order to just run this stuff? Or, is it that you've not got loads of overheads and you've not got loads of capital costs right now, but it's time, and actually maybe you've been spending a lot of time in kind planning this, getting this together, and your biggest cost might be staff time or facilitators time, or who knows, maybe you're setting up a fancy website and online portal or apps, and that technology and that technical support is going to be the big cost. You'll know what your costs are going to be, and thinking about as you evolve over time. So once you get past the first 6 months, the first 2 years, the first 3 years, if you can think that far, how might your cost change over time? So you might put together some cost thinking for right now, and then in 6 months, in 12 months, if you were to answer those questions projecting into the future, what changes? What's going to be your biggest expenditure in 6 months, in 2 years, if things go to plan? And you can weigh up what might change as a result. You might need to cover more marketing costs. You might need more impact and evaluation costs in order to demonstrate the evidence of what you're doing to pitch to commissioners or larger funders. You might need to buy more equipment. You might, be in satellite organisations for a number of years and then realise that you're going to need your own premises to operate from. Thinking all of this through is really important. Hopefully, depending on what stage you're at and what your plans look like and what your proposition looks like and how successful you are, there should be some sort of surplus. And, that could be surplus cash, that could be surplus time and energy. It's surplus of some sort that you're reinvesting back somewhere. So where do you plan to invest your profits or your surpluses? Surpluses in the social economy, in the charity and social enterprise world, can look quite different to traditional business. So where are the surpluses going to be, and who's going to benefit from those? And then, as we spoke about on the 2-sentence business plan, thinking about what does your revenue look like? What are your income sources? It says here, break them down by percentage. You could do that, but I think it's getting a ratio, really. It's thinking about where are you prioritizing your time in terms of finding new business, finding new income, finding new partners and stakeholders, and is it going to equate to more resources and income and revenue to be able to then operate what you're doing, create some sort of surplus that you can reinvest back in your community. So I've given you a kind of walk round, the business model canvas there. I hope it's helped describe and at least give you some scenarios and some examples for what to put, how to think, how to consider those sections. And ultimately you'll look at this and think, I need to start here because that's where I understand. I need to start here because that's what I know. And that's the beauty of this. You're not looking at this this content page of a business plan thinking, oh gosh, where do I start? That's a lot to do. You know, you can just bullet point down what you can. Think about where the gaps in your knowledge are, where the gaps in your research are, where the gaps in your customer, stakeholder and partner feedback is, to strengthen and endorse and give a reason for why what you're doing is key, critical, necessary, and something they're going to support and be part of, so that you can then convince the wider world of the same, and you know, pitch this and use this content and information either as it is as a pitch, you know, at one of the, as I mentioned, the proper good sort of community soup style events, where they're going to be asking you to pitch your ideas for small grants and cash and support, or whether you're doing much more thorough research and chunks and sections of strategies and reports into a fuller business plan to seek to draw down perhaps some loan funding, or some, you know, wider funds from other grants, or to put to commissioners and others, or just to convince your community, your board and your team, this is the direction of travel. Here's what we've got clarity on. Here's what we need help with. So there's so many ways that doing this kind of exercise can be helpful for you, depending on what stage of that journey that you're at. And I hope you find some of this useful. I'm just wanting to say, you know, thanks for listening. We've certainly happy to follow up with anybody who wants to get in touch with us. As I say, I'm Nicola Torkington, and if you email info@flourishtogether.org.uk, we can send you some templates on this stuff. We've got a whole range of events and peer learning and training sessions that we run in Manchester and Stockport, and we're doing some in partnership with Sector 3 over the next 6 months or more, so it'd be great to meet some of you in person if you've listened online. Obviously, contact the team direct at Sector 3, info@sector3 sk.org, and you can see their website as well for other options, support. There's a funding guide, there's all sorts, so see what's helpful for you, and thanks for listening.